Hi, welcome back to Videos from the Ville. I'm Professor Charles Greenewalt, and this is Introduction to City Planning. On this particular tape, we are going to talk about theories of the city. Here we find that as we look at individuals that have written about theories of the city, that these theories tend to fall into general categories. Either one, individuals are trying to account for the location, trying to figure out where cities are built and why, or number two, we find that theories of the city can also be about what are the moral consequences of city life for human beings. If humans live in cities long enough, what will happen to them? Well, as we look at location theories, we want to start out with Charles Cooley. If you go to your PowerPoints, you can see his image, you can see his picture in the upper right-hand picture of one of the first slides. We find that Charles Cooley told us that in times gone by, in the past, that cities were located on the basis of what? Cities were built where they are because they were either close to, by proximity, they were close to a religious establishment, they were close to a fort, or they were built somewhere for a political consideration. You find that today, what seems to be more the case is that the primary reason for location of cities can be transportation. It can be a break in transportation, such as a break in a journey, where the colonists came to America or going up a navigable river, say going up the James River towards what is today Richmond. They would get to the fall line where the waters tumble over a break in the geology of the region, and where you have to pull the ship or the boat out of the river and portage around the waterfalls, or you'd have to build a canal to get around that. Well, these places that where there is a break in the transportation, a break in the journey, could be one place where cities are built in recent history. And this could be even if the break involves no more than a transfer of goods from one carrier to another. This particular break may involve a lot of equipment and many different facilities. So we find that when we look at the issue of transportation, it's at the mouths of rivers or other key points in rivers, such as, again, the fall lines, where cities might be located, or places where hills and plains meet, or other such geographic configurations occur. The great majority of American cities, for example, they are located on navigable rivers and on navigable lakes. And on your PowerPoints, I have a pictures in there of New Orleans, Louisiana, and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Of course, Pittsburgh, when you leave the Gulf of Mexico, you go up the Mississippi to the Ohio River, and in the Ohio River, you go up the Ohio River until it breaks into the Monongahela and the Allegheny Rivers. They together form the Ohio River, and you will find yourself in Pittsburgh. Adna Weber is another location theorist. I find that in 1899, Adna, A-D-N-A, Weber, W-E-B-E-R, Adna Weber wrote a great book, what's considered to be a classic today, called Growth of Cities in the 19th Century. Growth of Cities in the 19th Century. And Adna is one of the first individuals to try to process a theoretical concern with the city and attempt to explain why they're located where they are. He believed that people are concentrated in cities as a result of economic forces. And these economic forces were made even more powerful and more significant with the onset of the Industrial Revolution. He explained the growth of cities primarily in economic terms, but he believed that you could also find political and social reasons as well for these phenomena. Adna Weber also talked about secondary economic reasons. He said that the city grows not only because of revolutions in transportation, revolutions finance, production, and commerce, but also the city will grow due to the lure, the seduction of high wages and different opportunities in many different fields. Well, you find Adna goes on to talk about the political causes of city growth. What happens in politics that would cause a city to grow? And he names 4 different factors. Number 1, he talks about legislation that promotes the freedom of trade, number 1. Number 2, he talks about legislation that promotes the freedom of migration. Number 3, talks about centralizing administration with its location of people in civic centers. And number 4, you find that if you've established free forms of land tenure that are politically defended in the city, these all can be political causes of city growth. What are the social causes of city growth, according to Adna? What are the social causes of city growth? Social causes of city growth would be, for example, education. Amusements would be another social cause of city growth. Education, amusements. Number 3 would be a higher standard of living. Looking for a higher standard of living. Number 4 would be attractions based on intellectual associations. So number 4 would be attractions of intellectual associations. Number 5 would be the fact that you are completely habituated, you're completely accustomed to an urban environment and are not happy unless you're in an urban environment. 6th and finally, a social cause of city growth is a diffusion of knowledge, about the values of city life, Well, the moral consequences of city life. Weber was unconvinced that the city spelled the moral ruin of mankind. So Weber was unconvinced that the city spelled the moral ruin of mankind. In fact, he devoted a chapter of his book to reviewing the systematic indictments of city life in favor of country life. He devoted a whole chapter of his book to reviewing the systematic indictments of city life in favor of country life, and that chapter is entitled Physical and Moral Condition. Weber's propositions are what? Weber's propositions were that the city-born reside in the poorest quarters of the city, that the city-born predominate in the lowest occupations of the lowest social classes. Number 3, that the city-born contribute an unduly large proportion of degenerates, criminals, lunatics, and suicides. Number 4, cities have a low rate of natural increase or even a deficit birth rate. Number 5, that city population consists of as many country-borns as city-borns. And number 6, the typical city class is incapable of self-perpetuation. These were all propositions that Weber thought would be worthwhile testing. Well, Weber did indeed test all of these propositions, and he treated these propositions as testable hypotheses. What did he find? He concluded after a great deal of research that these propositions were either mistaken or they were only partially true. For example, he conceded that prostitution was a profession of the city, but he noted in many instances that the prostitutes were supplied by recruitment from corrupted rural homes. Another person that talked about the moral consequences of city life was Josiah Strong. Josiah Strong's 1898 book called The 20th Century City is a very good example of this. Josiah Strong simply thinks that modern civilization showed a very one-sided development. A very one-sided development of material in contrast to moral and spiritual properties. So Josiah Strong believes that modern civilization has concerned itself much more with the development of materialism in terms rather than the building up of investigations into the moral and spiritual side of man's existence and man's life. Well, we find that material growth was seen in the development of a materialistic city. The materialistic city's phenomenal growth was the result of several things. Josiah Strong thought that a materialistic city, which had this phenomenal growth, was a result of the development of transportation, the substitution of mechanical power for hand power, and the redistribution of population because of the development of scientific agriculture. The redistribution of population because of the development of scientific agriculture. Distribution of population because of the development of scientific regulation. So, Strong saw society as undergoing an irreversible transformation. An irreversible transformation from farm to city. Excuse me. Strong believed that a city was materialistic whenever its intellectual and whenever its moral development were not commensurate with the physical growth of the city. So again, Strong believed that a city had become materialistic when the intellectual growth of the city and the moral growth of the city did not keep pace with the physical growth of the city. I have an example down here on your PowerPoints. Strong believed that there were at least 150,000 unnecessary deaths in New York City in 1890 as a result of poor sanitation practices. Strong also noted the disappearance of home life. The disappearance of home life at both extremes of the social ladder. You find that the rich went ahead and they eliminated family life. They substituted club life. They substituted hotel life, living the quote-unquote good life in very expensive hotels and clubs, and seeking a wide array of social contexts there rather than focusing on your family. And then on the other hand, you also have the homeless masses, which lived in lodging homes, tenements, or they were idle sitting throughout the city. And of course, here we have an example of the club life on the right side of the screen and at the bottom, and that, of course, is the Waldorf Astoria. And that brings to a close our discussion of theories of the city based on either the location of the city or the consequences for the human condition of living in the city. We'll be right back with the next video in just a few minutes.